Hi, I'm Johnny Engineer Turmel, and considering I'm running for Prime Minister of the planet with a solution I think could fix the whole world, which won the Occupy Wall Street Movement's Silver Bullet Award, the Argentine solution, which I'll refer to regularly in this video. And the Argentine solution happened in the 1980s and in 2001 when the Argentine banking system crashed, and by 2006 all their foreign debt had been paid off. Well, how'd they do that? Well, provinces were told by their unions, you're not going to lay anybody off because you got no money. We'll take small denomination provincial bonds if we can use them for hydro taxes, medical, and licenses. Well, everybody took the bonds, no layoffs, full employment, all foreign debt paid off in 5 years. Any government, anywhere, can pay their people with small denomination bonds, too. At the same time, I'm a supporter of the Unilets, and Lets have been making news in Spain, where they now have 300 time banks in the last few months, and in Greece, where the Lets are making news with their barter network, time banking, and in Portugal. And so anyway, the Unilets is simply going to be the union of all these little time trading databases out there into one big one. So those are the solutions. We're going to talk about money, but I want to point out that Dennis Kucinich has a bill in Congress, Bill 2990, to use treasury notes, treasury money, to fund infrastructure like Abraham Lincoln did back 150 so years ago. So anyway, that's a great idea. It's the same idea as the Argentine bonds. The Argentine solution is the Kucinich solution, and it's kind of sad when you think that you've got Kucinich out there pushing his solution in Congress to provide enough funding, interest-free, to put everybody to work like they did in Argentina, and yet you got these low-tech clowns who keep talking about all they can do is cut from here to put over there, or raise funds over here to put over there, but never have enough money because they haven't mastered the money system. So, the first Obama-Romney debate from Denver in the 2012 elections.
Good evening from the Magnus Arena at the University of Denver in Denver, Colorado. I'm Jim Lara of the PBS NewsHour, and I welcome you to the first of the 2012 presidential debates between President Barack Obama, the Democratic nominee, and former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney,
Where's Gary Johnson?
Nominee. This debate and the next three, 2 presidential, 1 vice presidential, are sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debate.
Democrats and Republicans.
Domestic issues, and will follow a format designed by the Commission. There will be 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers for the first question, then open discussion for the remainder of each segment. Thousands of people offered suggestions on segment subjects or questions via the internet and other means, but I made the final selections, and for the record, they were not submitted for approval to the Commission or the candidates. The segments, as I announced in advance, will be 3 on the economy and 1 each on health care, the role of government, and governing, with an emphasis throughout on differences, specifics, and choices. Both candidates will also have 2-minute closing statements. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, applause, boos, hisses, among other noisy, distracting things, so we may all concentrate on what the candidates have to say.
Perfect.
There is a noise exception right now, though, as we welcome President Obama and Governor Romney.
Happy times.
Jim? Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Let's start the economy, segment 1, and let's begin with jobs.
Paychecks.
What are the major differences between the two of you about how you would go about creating new jobs.
Without new paychecks.
We have 2 minutes. Each of you have 2 minutes to start. The coin toss is determined. Mr. President, you go first.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, for this opportunity. I want to thank Governor Romney and the University of Denver for your hospitality. There are a lot of points I want to make tonight, but the most important one
We need jobs.
is that 20 years ago I became the luckiest man on earth because Michelle Obama agreed to marry me.
Oh, wow.
And so I just want to wish, sweetie, you happy anniversary and let you know that a year from now we will not be celebrating it in front of 40 million people. 4 years ago, we went through the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Millions of jobs were lost. The auto industry was on the brink of collapse. The financial system had frozen up. And because of the resilience and the determination of the American people, we've begun to fight our way back. Over the last 30 months, we've seen 5 million jobs in the private sector created. The auto industry has come roaring back. And housing has begun to rise. But we all know that we've still got a lot of work to do. And so the question here tonight is not where we've been, but where we're going. Governor Romney has a perspective that says if we cut taxes, skew towards the wealthy, and roll back regulations, that we'll be better off. I've got a different view. I think we've got to invest in education and training.
I call it splashing in the pool. Romney wants to take it from there to put over there, and he wants to take it from here to put over there.
I think it's important for us to develop new sources of energy here in America. That we change our tax
Yes,
code to
we need to
make
do
sure
that.
we're helping small businesses and companies that are investing here in the United States. That we take some of the money that we're saving as we wind down two wars to rebuild America.
Wind down two.
And
It's got
we
5
reduce our
going.
deficit in a balanced way that allows us to make these critical investments. Now, ultimately, it's going to be up to the voters, to you, which path we should take. Are we going to double down on the top-down economic policies that help to get us into this mess, or do we embrace a new economic patriotism that says America does best when the middle class does best? And I'm looking forward to having that debate.
Governor Romney, 2 minutes.
Nice
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be here with you.
Let me first point out that when he says we've made a comeback, it's after they've lost 50%. Now they made a 2% comeback. Wow, not much.
You and I appreciate the chance to be with the President. I'm pleased to be at the University of Denver. I appreciate their welcome and also the Presidential Commission on these debates. And congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your anniversary. I'm sure this was the most romantic place you could imagine, here with me. So congratulations. This is obviously a very tender topic. I've had the occasion over the last couple of years of meeting people across the country. I was in Dayton, Ohio, and a woman grabbed my arm and she said, "I've been out of work since May. Can you help me?" Ann yesterday was at a rally in Denver, and a woman came up to her with a baby in her arms and said, "Ann, my husband has had 4 jobs in 3 years, part-time jobs. He's lost his most recent job, and we've now just lost our home. Can you help us?"
What do you think? Is he going to have a plan to help her?
And the answer is yes.
Oh,
we can help. But it's going to take a different path. Not the one we've been on.
Not that.
The one the President describes.
He knows not where to go.
Cut taxes for the rich. That's not what I'm going to do.
Not that.
My plan has 5 basic parts. 1, get us energy independent. North American energy independent. That creates about 4 million jobs.
That's a goal.
Number 2, open up more trade, particularly in Latin America. Crack down on China if and when they cheat. Number 3, make sure our people have the skills they need to succeed.
Make sure.
The best schools in the world. We're far away from that now. Number 4, get us to a balanced budget.
Get us to
Number
it.
5, champion small business. It's small business that creates the jobs in America. And over the last 4 years, small business people have decided that America may not be the place to open a new business because new business startups are down to a 30-year low. I know what it takes to get small business going again, to hire people. Now I'm concerned that the path that we're on is just going to be successful. The President has a view very similar to the view he had when he ran 4 years ago, that a bigger government, spending more, taxing more, regulating more, if you will, trickle-down government would work. That's not the right answer for America. I'll restore the vitality to get...
Well, actually, Obama's not doing that right either. Remember, before Obama can spend a lot for infrastructure, he has to borrow it. while Dennis Kucinich, if he was president, he'd have the Treasury print up the chips to pay the people to fix the infrastructure, which everybody could accept to pay their taxes for the infrastructure repair. So neither Obama is going to be able to fix the infrastructure, and yeah, he's right, Obama can't do it, but that doesn't mean he can. He hasn't come up with any new sources of money to pay for it, has he?
It's America working again.
Yeah, without any paychecks, but they're working again.
Mr. President, please respond directly to what the governor just said about trickle-down. His trickle-down approach, as he said yours is.
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
let me talk specifically about what I think we need to do.
Yes, we need
First,
to. Yes.
we've got to improve our education system.
Yes, sir.
And we've made enormous progress drawing on ideas both from Democrats and Republicans.
Progress on drawing.
Are already starting to show gains in some of the toughest to deal with schools. We've got a program called Race to the Top.
A program.
Has
Magic program.
prompted reforms in 46 states.
Tell us a
around the
lot
country,
about
raising
it.
standards, improving how we train teachers. So now I want to hire another 100,000 new math and science teachers.
Yeah.
And create 2 million more slots in our community colleges so that people can...
Wouldn't it be nice if he could create that many new jobs, if he can only come up with some paychecks?
get free for the jobs that are out there right now. And I want to make sure that we keep
Make sure, yes.
tuition low for our young people.
Yes, sir. That's
When it
nice.
comes to our tax code, Governor Romney and I both agree that our corporate tax rate is too high. So I want to lower it, particularly for manufacturing, taking it down to 25%. But I also want to close those
Splashing in the
loopholes
pool.
that are giving incentive for companies that are shipping jobs overseas. I want to provide tax breaks for companies that are investing here in the United States. On energy, Governor Romney and I, we both agree that we've got to boost American energy production. And oil and natural gas production are higher than they've been in years.
He's got no money, so he'll give him tax breaks.
But I also believe that we've got to look at the energy sources of the future, like wind and solar and biofuels, and
Yes, we need to look at that.
make those investments. So
If we find the
this
money.
is possible. Now, in order for us to do it, we do have
If
to
we
close
find the money.
deficit, and one of the things
Oh,
that
gotta
we
close the
discussed
deficit.
tonight is, how do we deal with our tax code? And how do we make sure that we are reducing spending in a responsible way, but also how do we have enough revenue to make those investments? And this is where there's a difference, because Governor Romney's Central Economic Plan calls for a $5 trillion tax cut. On top of the extension of the Bush tax cuts, that's another $1 trillion. And $2 trillion in additional military spending that the military hasn't asked for. That's $8 trillion. How we pay for that, reduce the deficit, and make the investments that we need to make without dumping those costs on the middle-class Americans, I think, is one of the central questions this campaign.
So he knows he's looking for revenues for these investments. So he's not going to create the chips at the Treasury like Kucinich would, but he's going to look for old money, loan sharks, revenues to finance all these investments he's talking about. And of course, what are the chances of his really coming up with new revenues? Ha!
Both of you have
Dreamland!
spoken about a lot of different things. We're going to try to get through them in as specific a way as we possibly can.
Yeah.
But first, Governor Romney, do you have a question that you'd like to ask the President directly about something he just said?
Well, sure. I'd like to clear up the record and go through piece by piece. First of all, I don't have a $5 trillion tax cut. I don't have a tax cut of the scale that you're talking about. My view is that we ought to provide tax relief
Of
to
the
people in
scale?
the middle
What
class.
scale?
But I'm not going to reduce the share of taxes paid by high-income people.
That's what he's not going to
High-income
do.
people are doing just fine in this economy. They'll do fine whether you're president or I am. The people who are having a hard time right now are middle-income Americans.
Oh, yes.
Under the president's policies, middle-income Americans have been buried.
And the broke people, well, he doesn't see
Middle-income
them.
Americans have seen their income come down by $4,300. This is a tax in and of itself. I'll call it the economy tax. It's been crushing. At the same time, gasoline prices have doubled under the president. Electric rates are up. Food prices are up. Health care costs have gone up by $2,500 a family. Middle-income families are being crushed. And so the question is how to get them going again. I've described it. It's energy and trade, the right kind of training programs,
programs,
and helping small business.
Miracle programs.
The cornerstones of my plan.
Yes.
But the president mentioned a couple of other ideas on this note. First, education. I agree. Education is key, particularly the future of our economy.
Oh, yes, we need it.
Training programs right now, we got 47 of them housed in the federal government, reporting to 8 different agencies. Overhead is overwhelming. We got to get those dollars back to the states.
We need
the workers so they can create their own pathways to getting the training they need for jobs that will really help them. The second area, taxation. We agree. We got to bring the tax.
Now remember, there's no paychecks out there for people trained for all these jobs.
Tax rates down, and I do, both for corporations and for individuals. But in order for us not to lose revenue and have the government run out of money, I also lower deductions and credits and exemptions so that we keep taking in the same money when you also account for growth. The third area, energy. Energy is critical, and the president pointed out correctly that production of oil and gas in the U.S. is up, but not due to his policies, in spite of his policies. Mr. President, all of the increase in natural gas and oil has happened on private land, not on government land. On government land, your administration has cut the number of permits and licenses in half. If I'm president, I'll double them and also get the oil from offshore in Alaska, and I'll bring that pipeline in from Canada. And by the way, I like coal. I'm going to make sure we can continue to burn clean coal. People in the coal industry feel like it's getting crushed by your policies. I want to get America and North America energy independent.
That's what he wants.
Create those jobs. And finally, with regards to that tax cut, look, I'm not looking to cut massive taxes and to reduce the revenues going to the government. My number one principle is there'll be no tax cut that adds to the deficit. I want to underline that. No tax cut that adds to the deficit. But I do want to reduce the burden being paid by middle-income Americans. And to do that, that also means I cannot reduce the burden paid by high-income Americans. So any language to the contrary is simply not accurate.
You'll be taxing the rich.
Let's talk about taxes because I think it's instructive. Now, 4 years ago when I stood on this stage, I said that I would cut taxes for middle-class families. And that's exactly what I did. We cut taxes for middle-class families by about $3,600.
Very middle class.
And the reason is because I believe that we do best when the middle class is doing well.
Sucked it in from the others. Splash it in the pool.
Those tax cuts, they had a little more money in their pocket. And so maybe they can buy a new car. They are certainly in a better position to weather the extraordinary recession we went through.
Maybe they can buy butter.
A computer for their kid who's going off to college. Which means they're spending more money, businesses have more customers, businesses make more profits, and then hire more workers. Now, Governor Romney's proposal that he's been promoting for 18 months calls for a $5 trillion tax cut on top of $2 trillion of additional spending for our military. And he is saying that he is going to pay for it by closing loopholes and deductions. The problem is that he's been asked over 100 times how you would close those deductions and loopholes.
All right. So he's saying he's going to splash it from here to over there, and I'm saying you can't splash it from here to over there. I'm going to splash it from over there to over here.
And he hasn't been able to identify them. But I'm going to make an important point here, Jim. When you add up all the loopholes and deductions that upper income individuals are currently taking advantage of, if you take those all away, you don't come close to paying for $5 trillion in tax cuts and $2 trillion in additional military spending.
How much do you come to?
That's why independent studies looking at this said the only way to meet Governor Romney's pledge of not reducing the deficit or not adding to the deficit is by burdening middle-class families.
4.9 trillion.
The children would pay about $2,000 more. Now that's not my analysis. That's the analysis of economists who have looked at this. And
I'm still waiting for how much.
Top-down economics where folks at the top are doing well, so the average person making $3 million is getting a $250,000 tax break, while middle-class families are burdened further. That's not what I believe is a recipe for economic growth.
That's wrong splashing.
Let's just stay on taxes.
But I get it. Right.
Yeah, let's just stay on taxes for a moment.
Well, but virtually everything he just said about my tax plan is inaccurate.
Right.
So if the tax plan he described were a tax plan I was asked to support, I'd say absolutely not. I'm not looking for a $5 trillion tax cut. What I've said is I won't put in place a tax cut that adds to the deficit. That's part one. So there's no economist can say Mitt Romney's tax plan adds $5 trillion if I say I will not add to the deficit with my tax plan. Number two.
So his tax plan can't work.
Individuals. I know that you and your running mate keep saying that, and I know it's a popular thing to say with a lot of people, but it's just not the case. Look, I got 5 boys. I'm used to people saying something that's not always true, but just keep on repeating it, and ultimately hoping I'll believe it. But that is not the case, all right? I will not reduce the taxes paid by high-income Americans. And number 3, I will not, under any circumstances, raise taxes on middle-income families. I will lower taxes on middle-income families. Now, you cite a study.
So he's going to raise the taxes on the poorest. It's the only one's left.
I saw a study that came out today that said you're going to raise taxes by $3,000 to $4,000 on middle-income families. There are all these studies out there. But let's get to the bottom line. That is, I want to bring down rates.
He wants to.
Bring the rates down, at the same time lower deductions,
That's what he wants.
exemptions and credits and so forth, so we keep getting the revenue we need. And you think, well, then why lower the rates? And the reason is because small business pays that individual rate. 54% of America's workers work in businesses that are taxed not at the corporate tax rate, but at the individual tax rate. And if we lower that rate, they will be able to hire more people. For me, this is about jobs. This is about getting jobs for the American people.
Yeah. Do you challenge what the governor just said about his own plan?
Well, for 18 months he's been running on this tax plan. And now, 5 weeks before the election, he's saying that his big, bold idea is never mind. And the fact is that if you are lowering the rates the way you described, Governor, then it is not possible to come up with enough deductions and loopholes that only affect high-income individuals to avoid either raising the deficit or burdening the middle class.
Without going to treasury.
It's math. It's arithmetic. Now, Governor Romney and I do share a deep interest in encouraging...
And his is not less, man.
So at the same time that my tax plan has already lowered taxes for 98% of families, I also lowered taxes for small businesses 18 times.
Who paid for
What I want to do is continue the tax rates, the tax cuts that we put into place for small businesses and families. But I have said that for incomes over $250,000 a year, that we should go back to the rates that we had when Bill Clinton was president, when we created 23 million new jobs, went from deficit to surplus, and created a whole lot of millionaires to boot. And the reason this is important is because
the old rate did all that.
We can not only reduce the deficit, we can not only encourage job growth through small businesses, but we're also able to make the investments that are necessary in education or in energy. And we do have...
having money allows you to make investments.
Small business. Under my plan, 97% of small businesses would not see their income taxes go up. Governor Romney says, well, those top 3%, they're the job creators, they'd be burdened. But under Governor Romney's definition, there are a whole bunch of millionaires and billionaires who are small businesses. Donald Trump is a small business. And I know Donald Trump doesn't like to think of himself as small anything, but that's how you define small businesses if you're getting business income. And that kind of approach, I believe, will not grow our economy because the only way to pay for it without either burdening the middle class or blowing up our deficit is to make drastic cuts in things like education, making sure that we are continuing to invest in basic science and research, all the things that are helping America grow.
If only we had the money.
All right.
Jim, let me just come back to that point, which is these small businesses we're talking about.
Excuse me, just so everybody understands, we're way over our first 15 minutes.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's okay, it's great.
That's okay.
No problem. Now, you all don't have a problem, I don't have a problem, because we're still on the economy. But we're going to come back to taxes and we're going to move on to the deficit and a lot of other things, too. Okay, go ahead, sir.
You bet. Well, Mr. President, you're absolutely right, which is that with regards to 97% of the businesses are not taxed at the 35% tax rate, they're taxed at a lower rate. But those businesses that are in the last 3% of businesses happen to employ half of all the people who work in small business. Those are the businesses that employ 1/4 of all the workers in America. And your
the big
plan is to take
businesses.
the tax rate from 35% to 40%. Now, I talked to a guy who has a very small business. He's in the electronics business in St. Louis. He has 4 employees. He said he and his son calculated how much they pay in taxes. Federal income tax, federal payroll tax, state income tax, state sales tax, state property tax, gasoline tax. It added up to well over 50% of what they earned. And your plan is to take the tax rate on successful small businesses from 35% to 40%. The National Federation of Independent Businesses has said,
I know, aren't his splashes just terrible?
that
Taking
will cost
from them to give to them.
700,000 jobs. I don't want to cost jobs. My priority
He
is
doesn't
jobs.
want.
And so what I do is I bring down the tax rate.
His priority is jobs. Even though he has no paychecks, that's his priority. What's his chance of success? Loser.
Rates, lower deductions and exemptions. The same idea behind Bowles-Simpson, by the way. Get the rates down, lower deductions and exemptions.
Get this,
to
do
create
this.
more
Oh,
jobs,
if we could just
because
get
there's
this
nothing
done.
better for getting us to a balanced budget
And
than
more
having
jobs.
more people working, earning more money,
Just gotta get-
paying more taxes,
earning
That's
more
by far
money
the most
without
effective
any
and
more
efficient
money.
way to get this budget balanced.
Jim, you may want to move on to another topic, but I would just say this to the American people. If you believe that we can cut taxes by $5 trillion and add $2 trillion in additional spending
Yeah, say it again.
that the military is not asking,
Bam, bam,
$7 trillion,
Yep.
just to give you a sense, over 10 years, that's more than our entire defense budget. And you think that by closing loopholes and deductions for the well-to-do, somehow you will not end up picking up the tab.
How much? How
And
much? Tell us.
Governor Romney's plan may work for you. But I think math, common sense, and our history
Well, do your math.
shows us that's
Lawyer.
not the recipe for job growth. Look, we've tried this. We've tried both approaches. The approach that Governor Romney is talking about is the same sales pitch that was made in 2001 and 2003. And we ended up with the slowest job growth in 50 years. We ended up moving from surplus to deficits, and it all culminated in the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Now, Bill Clinton tried the approach that I'm talking about. We created 23 million new jobs. We went from deficit to surplus, and businesses did very well. So in some
Something
ways,
worked.
we've got some data on which approach is more likely to create jobs and opportunity for Americans. And I believe that the economy works best when middle-class families are getting tax breaks so that they've got some money in their pockets.
Easy.
And
I
those of us
believe
who've
leads
got
to all sorts of
really
nice
well
stuff,
because
eh?
of, this magnificent country that we
Yes,
live in,
yes, yes.
that we can afford to do a little bit more to make sure we're not blowing up the deficit.
We can afford, even though we got no more money, we can
I think I get the
afford.
last word. So
Well,
I'm
you're going to get the first word in the next segment.
Well, but he gets the first word of that segment. I get the last word of that segment. I hope. Let me just make this comment. First of all, let me repeat what I said.
Oh, then no, you
I'm not
said
in favor of a
it.
$5 trillion tax cut. That's not my plan.
How much is it?
My plan is not to put in place any tax cut that will add to the deficit.
But how much is it?
So you may keep referring to it as a $5 trillion tax cut, but that's not my plan.
Because I'm not going to give it to you anyway, because you can't qualify.
My plan is not like anything that's been tried before. My plan is to bring down rates, but also bring down deductions and exemptions and credits at the same time.
Yeah.
So the revenue stays in, but that we bring down rates to get more people working. My priority is putting people back to work in America. They're suffering in this country.
Yeah.
And we talk about
His
evidence.
priority.
Look at the evidence the last 4 years. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Terrible,
We've got
yes.
23 million people.
Something must be done.
Stop looking for work in this country.
Yeah.
We got, when the president took office, 32 million people on food
He
stamps.
knows something must be
47 million
done.
on food stamps today.
He knows how bad
Economic
it
growth
is.
This year, slower than last year.
Oh.
And last year, slower than the year before.
Oh.
Going forward with the status quo is not going to cut it for the American people who are struggling today.
All right, let's talk, we're still in the economy. This is theoretically now.
Mere change if status quo ain't good enough.
And specifically on what to do about the federal deficit.
Oh, specifically.
The federal debt.
They're both
And
short of
the
money.
question, you check 2 minutes on this.
Both got to borrow
And
from the banks.
Governor Romney, you
Never
go
thought of
first because
printing it themselves.
First on segment 1.
Yeah.
And the question is this: what are the differences between the two of you?
None.
As to how you would go about tackling the deficit problem in this country.
Different banks.
Thank you, Reza. It's a critical issue.
Loans from different
It's
banks.
not just an economic issue. I think it's a moral issue.
Moral?
I think it's frankly not moral for my generation to keep spending massively more than we take in.
Ah, must stop,
Knowing
yes.
those burdens are going to be passed on to the next generation.
Deficit bad.
And they're going to be paying the interest and the principal of their lives. And
yes.
the amount of debt we're adding at $1 trillion a year is simply not moral. So how do we do it?
Just like Bush did, remember?
There are three ways that you can cut a deficit.
Well, get
One,
this.
of course, is to raise taxes. Number two is to cut spending. And number three is to grow the economy. Because if more people work in a growing economy, they're paying taxes, and you can get the job done that way.
But how do you get more people working in an economy without more paychecks? With which they can pay those extra taxes for those extra revenues. Oh, he keeps forgetting that important step. Just, there'll be more jobs, there'll be more paychecks.
The president would prefer raising taxes. I understand. The problem with raising taxes is that it slows down the rate
And
of
then they're
growth.
stuck with the other options
only.
only.
Get the job done. I want to lower spending and encourage economic growth at the same time.
That's what he wants.
What things would I cut from spending?
Tell
Well,
us.
first of all, I will eliminate all programs by this test if they don't pass it.
Oh.
Is the program so critical it's worth borrowing money from China to pay for it? And if not, I'll get rid of it. Obamacare's on my list. I apologize, Mr. President. I use that term with all respect.
I like it.
Good. Okay, good. So I'll get rid of that. I'm sorry, Jim. I'm going to stop the subsidy to PBS. I'm going to stop other things. I like PBS. I love Big Bird.
These are
I
his
like that
cuts.
too.
He'll
But
slash
I'm
over
not
here,
gonna keep
slash over
spending
there.
money on things to borrow money from China to pay for. So that's number one. Number two, I'll take programs that are currently good programs, but I think it'd be run more efficiently at the state level and send them to the state.
Oh, yeah.
Number three, I'll
They'll
make
pay
government
for
more
them.
efficient and cut back the number of employees, combine some agencies and departments. My cutbacks will be done through attrition, by the way.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
the approach we
Less
have to take
people
to get
for
America
better
back.
service.
The president said he'd cut the deficit in half. Unfortunately, he doubled it.
Yeah.
$1 trillion deficits for the last 4 years.
And you can take that to the bank,
President's put in
Obama
place
said.
as much public debt, almost as much debt held by the public as all prior presidents combined.
Gee, just like George Bush.
When I walked into
That's
the
exponential, always equal to prior debt combined.
And we know where it came from. 2 wars that were paid for on a credit card, 2 tax cuts that were not paid for, and a whole bunch of programs that were not paid for, and then a massive economic crisis. And despite that, what we've said is, yes, we had to take some initial emergency measures to make sure we didn't slip into a Great Depression. But what we've also said is, let's make sure that we are cutting out those things that are not helping us grow. So, 77 government programs, everything from aircrafts that the Air Force had ordered, but
So he's already slashed as much as he can.
18 government programs for education that were well-intentioned.
And he's still short.
Weren't helping kids learn. We went after medical fraud in Medicare and Medicaid very aggressively, more aggressively than
How
ever
much did
before.
you save and how
And
much
saved
did it
tens of
cost?
billions of dollars, $50 billion of waste taken out of the system.
Wow.
And I worked with Democrats and Republicans to cut $1 trillion out of our discretionary domestic budget. That's the largest cut in the discretionary domestic budget since...
Better service with less people.
Now, we all know we've
Another
got
one.
to do more. And so I put forward a specific $4 trillion deficit reduction plan. It's on the website. You can look at all the numbers, what cuts we make and what revenue we raise.
That's right.
And the way we do it is $2.50 for every cut. We ask for $1 of additional revenue, paid for, as I indicated earlier, by asking those of us who have done very well in this country to contribute a little bit more to reduce the deficit. Governor Romney earlier mentioned the polls.
Yeah, but he just told us it wasn't worth very much, all the money from the rich people. To get him to contribute a little bit more from what ain't very much is a big improvement for Obama. What a nickel-dimer. If it's really so little.
Simpson Commission. Well, that's how the commission, bipartisan commission that talked about how we should move forward, suggested we have to do it in a balanced way with some revenue and some spending cuts. And this is a major difference that Governor Romney and I have. Let me just finish this point because you're looking for...
Notice he said some revenue and some spending cuts. He just couldn't bring himself to say some revenue enhancements like more taxation. He just couldn't say it.
Contrast. When Governor Romney stood on a stage with other Republican candidates for the nomination, and he was asked, would you take $10 of spending cuts for just $1 of revenue? And he said no. Now, if you take such an unbalanced approach, then that means you are going to be gutting our investments in schools and education. It means that Governor Romney talked about Medicaid and how we could send it back to the states, but effectively this means a 30% cut in the primary program we help for seniors who are in nursing homes, for kids who are with disabilities. And that is not a right strategy for us to move forward.
That's not the right way. What is? Oh, no time.
Do you support Simpson Bowles?
Simpson Bowles, the president should have grabbed that.
No, I mean, do you support Simpson Bowles?
I have my own plan. It's not the same as Simpson Bowles. But in my view, the president should have grabbed it. If you wanted to make some adjustments to it, take it, go to Congress, fight for it.
That's what we've done. Made some adjustments to it, and we're putting it forward before Congress right now. A $4 trillion plan.
But you've been president 4 years. You've been president 4 years. You said you cut the deficit in half. It's now 4 years later. We still have $1 trillion deficits. The CBO says we'll have $1 trillion deficit each of the next 4 years.
He broke his promise.
If you're reelected, we'll get to $1 trillion debt. You have said before you cut the deficit in half. And I love this idea of $4 trillion in cuts. You found $4 trillion in ways to reduce or to get closer to a balanced budget, except we still show $1 trillion deficits every year. That doesn't get the job done. Let me come back and say, why is it that I don't want to raise taxes? Why don't I want to raise taxes?
That's what he doesn't want.
And actually, you said it back in 2010. You said, look, I'm going to extend the tax policies that we have. Now, I'm not going to raise taxes on anyone. Because when the economy is growing slow like this, when we're in recession, you shouldn't raise taxes on anyone. Well, the economy is still growing slow. As a matter of fact, it's growing much more slowly now than when you made that statement. And so if you believe the same thing, you just don't want to raise taxes on people. And the reality is, it's not just wealthy people.
So how do you pay?
It's not just Donald Trump you're taxing. It's all those businesses that employ 1/4 of the workers in America, these small businesses that are taxed as individuals. You raise taxes and you kill jobs. That's why the National Federation of Independent Businesses said your plan will kill 700,000 jobs. I don't want to kill jobs in this environment. Make one more point.
Let's back to the taxes thing for a moment.
Okay.
He doesn't want to, yes.
Well, we've had this discussion before.
No, they got the idea that in order to reduce the deficit, there has to be revenue in addition to cuts.
There has to be revenue in addition to cuts. Now, Governor Romney has ruled out revenue. He's ruled out revenue.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
the revenue I get is by more people working, getting higher pay, paying more taxes. That's how we get growth and how we balance the budget. But the idea of taxing people more, putting more people out of work.
Now, first of all, the government borrows 100, spends it, has to tax it out with interest. It's impossible to have a balanced budget unless you're getting some outside money from someone else. Someone has to bite the bullet and get foreclosed on in your town by your government borrowing 10 and promising to put back 11.
You'll never get there. You never balance the budget by raising taxes. Spain spends 42% of their total economy on government.
Okay.
We're now spending 42% of our economy on government. I don't want to go down the path to Spain. I want to go down the path of growth that puts Americans to work.
Ah, yes, he wants to go down the path to dreamland, right? That's his path. That's what he wants. Notice how they can flower it all up just by saying, this is what I want. Flowers and roses on the road and a good time for everybody. And they go, wow, he really wants great stuff for us, doesn't he? Let's vote for him.
With more money coming in because they're working.
I see. More money's going to come in because more people are working.
To get the job done, it's got to be balanced.
If we're serious, we've got to take a balanced, responsible approach. And by the way, this is not just when it comes to individual taxes. Let's talk about corporate taxes. Now, I've identified areas where we can right away make a change that I believe would actually help the economy.
How much?
The oil industry gets $4 billion a year in corporate welfare. Basically, they get deductions that those small businesses that Governor Romney...
And if they don't get them, they'll charge more for their gas.
Now, does anybody think that ExxonMobil needs some extra money when they're making money every time you go to the pump?
And more if they don't get a subsidy.
Why wouldn't we want to eliminate that? Why wouldn't we eliminate
and then the prices go up.
For corporate jets?
Same
My
thing.
attitude is if you got a corporate jet, you can probably afford to pay full freight.
Oh yeah, how much is that going to be worth, nickel
When it comes
dimer?
to corporate taxes,
Corporate
Governor
jets.
Romney has said he wants to, in a revenue-neutral way, close loopholes, deductions. He hasn't identified which ones they are, but thereby bring down the corporate rate. Well, I want to do the same thing, but I've actually identified
That's what he wants.
how we can do that.
Yeah.
And part of the way to do it is to not give tax breaks to companies
is
that are
to not
shipping
do
jobs
this.
overseas. Right
We
now,
cannot do that.
you can actually take a deduction.
The way to do it is to not do that.
I think most Americans would say, that doesn't make sense, and all that raises revenue. And so if we take a balanced approach, what that then allows us to do is also to help young people, the way we already have during my administration, make sure that they can afford to go to college. It
Make
means
sure.
that the teacher that I met in Las Vegas,
Okay, things will be better now because he's going to make sure.
describes to me, she's got 42 kids in her class. The first 2 weeks, she's got them some of them sitting on the floor.
Things are bad.
Until finally they get reassigned. They're using textbooks that are 10 years old.
Oh, things are bad.
That is not a recipe for growth.
Yes,
that's not
that's
how
bad.
America was built.
That's right.
And so budgets reflect choices.
Yes.
Ultimately, we're going to have to make some decisions.
Yeah.
And if we're asking for no revenue, then that means that we've got to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff. And the magnitude of the tax cuts that you're talking about, Governor, would end up resulting in severe hardship for people, but more importantly, would not help us grow. As I
Someone's
indicated
gotta
before,
bite
we're
it,
talking
right?
about shifting Medicaid to states. We're talking about potentially a 30% cut in Medicaid over time. Now, that may not seem like a big deal when it just is numbers on a sheet of paper.
So tell us, how much?
But if we're talking about a family who's got an autistic
No,
kid,
no. Tell
and
us
is
the number.
depending on that Medicaid, that's a big problem. And governors are creative. There's no doubt about it. But they're not creative enough to make up for 30% of revenue on something like Medicaid. What ends up happening is some people
And what's the number?
not getting help.
Jim, we've gone a lot
Couldn't
of
give
time
us the number.
So it's going to take a minute to go from Medicaid
Go ahead.
to schools
Go back
to
to Medicaid.
oil to
Yeah.
tax breaks and companies going overseas. So let's go through them one by one. First of all, the Department of Energy has said the tax break for oil companies is $2.8 billion a year. And it's actually an accounting treatment, as you know, that's been in place for 100 years. Now,
It's time to end it.
and in 1 year, you provided $90 billion
$2 billion.
in breaks to the green energy world. Now, I like green energy as well, but that's about 50 years worth of what oil and gas receives. And you say Exxon and Mobil, actually this $2.8 billion goes largely to small companies, to drilling operators and so forth. But if we get that tax rate from 35% down to 25%, well, that $2.8 billion is on the table. Of course it's on the table. That's probably not going to survive to get that rate down to 25%.
Nickel
But don't
dimers,
forget,
eh?
You put $90 billion, like 50 years worth of breaks into solar and wind, to Solyndra and Fisker and Tesla and Enter1. I mean, I had a friend who said, "Don't just
Tesla?
pick the winners and losers, you pick the losers." All right?
Tesla,
So
loser?
This is not the kind of policy you want to have. You want to get America energy secure. The second topic, which is you said you get a deduction for taking a plant overseas. Look, I've been in business for 25 years.
Him making fun of Tesla. Nikola Tesla was the most brilliant electrical engineer and mathematician and inventor ever. He's the guy who invented alternating currency and the AC motor and everything about the electromagnetic world. Nikola Tesla saw it first. And this guy's making fun of work on Nikola Tesla's stuff. I'm amazed he even knows his name.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I maybe need to get a new accountant. But the idea that you get a break for shipping jobs overseas is simply not the case. What we do have right now is a setting where I'd like to bring money from overseas back to this country. And finally, Medicaid to states, I'm not quite sure where that came in except this, which is I would like to take the Medicaid dollars,
What he'd like, right?
and say to a state, you're going to get what you got last year, plus inflation, plus 1%. And then you're
Why
going
not
to
two?
manage your care for your poor in the way you think best. And I remember as a governor, when this idea was floated by Tommy Thompson, The governors, Republican and Democrats, said, please let us do that. We can care for our own poor in so much better and more effective a way than having the federal government tell us how to care for our poor. So let's state, one of the magnificent things about this country is the whole idea.
Let's change drivers on the medical system.
Don't have the federal government tell everybody what kind of training programs they have to have and what kind of Medicaid.
No, let's have 50 different state governments coming up with the rules.
We can step in and see if we can find a way to help them. But the right approach is one which relies on the brilliance of our people and states, not the federal government.
Relies on brilliance.
The economy on another part of it. All right? All right, this is segment 3, the economy. Entitlements. First answer goes to you, 2 minutes, Mr. President. Do you see a major difference between the two of you on Social Security?
You know, I suspect that on Social Security we've got a somewhat similar position. Social Security is structurally sound. It's going to have to be tweaked the way it was by Ronald Reagan and Democratic Speaker Tip O'Neill. But the basic structure is sound.
Yeah, we get their checks to them.
Talk about the
it's not
values
enough.
behind Social Security and Medicare. And then talk about Medicare, because that's the big driver of our deficits right now. You know, my grandmother, some of you know, helped to raise me. My grandparents did. My grandfather died a while back. My grandmother died 3 days before I was elected president. And she was fiercely independent. She worked her way up, only had a high school education, started as a secretary, ended up being the vice president of a local bank. And she ended up living alone by choice. And the reason she could be independent was because of Social Security and Medicare. She had worked all her life, put in this money, and understood that there was a basic guarantee, a floor under which she could...
So Social Security is good.
And that's the perspective I bring when I think about what's called entitlements. You know, the name itself implies some sense of dependency on the part of these folks. These are folks who've worked hard, like my grandmother. And there are millions of people out there who are counting on this. So my approach is to say, how do we strengthen the system over the long term? And in Medicare, what we did was we said, we are going to have to bring down the costs if we're going to deal with our long-term deficits. But to do that, let's look where some of the money is going. $716 billion we were able to save from the Medicare program by no longer overpaying insurance companies, by making sure that we weren't overpaying providers. And using that money, we were actually able to lower prescription drug costs for seniors by an average of $600, and we were also able to make a significant dent in providing them the kind of preventive care that will ultimately save money throughout the system.
And that resulted in better health care, less insurance coverage. You know, they're not going to pay you as easy anymore if they don't have the proper subsidies. Cuts to the doctors, more doctors putting in more time for less pay. Generally unhappier health care system, right? He's proud of.
So
cuts to health care
for us to deal
makes
with
it sound so wonderful.
Medicare, in particular, is to lower health care costs. And when it comes to Social Security, as I said, you don't need a major structural change in order to make sure that Social Security is there for the future.
That's right. The checking system and the mail work just fine. Oh, we're talking about how much. Never got into how much. But the system for getting the check to you works fine. So Social Security works fine. Just not enough money in your check.
To follow up on this. First, Governor Romney, you have 2 minutes on Social Security and entitlement.
Well, Jim, our seniors depend on these programs, and I know anytime we talk about entitlements, people become concerned that something's going to happen that's going to change their life for the worse. And the answer is neither the President nor I are proposing any changes for any current retirees or near retirees, either to Social Security or Medicare. So if you're 60 or around 60 or older, you don't need to listen any further. But for younger people, we need to talk about what changes are going to be occurring. Oh, I just thought about one. And that is, in fact, I was wrong when I said the President isn't proposing any changes for current retirees. In fact, he is on Medicare. On Social Security, he's not. But on Medicare, for current retirees, he's cutting $716 billion from the program. Now he says by not overpaying hospitals and providers. Actually just going to them and saying we're going to reduce the rates you get paid across the board everybody's going to get a lower rate. That's not just going after places where there's abuse. That's saying we're cutting the rates. Some 15% of hospitals and nursing homes say they won't take any more Medicare patients under that scenario. We also have 50% of doctors who say they won't take more Medicare patients. We have 4 million people on Medicare Advantage that will lose Medicare Advantage because of those $716 billion in cuts.
But Obama saved us $716 billion.
I can't understand how you can cut Medicare $716 billion for current recipients of Medicare. Now you point out, well, we're putting some back. We're going to give a better prescription program. That's $1 for every 15 you've cut. They're smart enough to know that's not a good trade. I want to take that $716 billion you cut and put it back into Medicare. By the way, we can include a prescription program if we need to improve it.
Yeah, more money.
Cutting $716 billion from Medicare to be able to balance the additional cost of Obamacare is, in my opinion, a mistake. And with regards to young people coming along, I've got proposals to make sure Medicare and Social Security are there for them without any question.
To make sure. Proposals to make sure.
I think it's important for Governor Romney to present this plan that he says will only affect folks in the future.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
And the essence of the plan is that he would turn Medicare into a voucher program. It's called premium support, but it's understood to be a voucher program. His money made...
And you don't support that?
I don't. And let me explain why.
Again, that's for future people, right? Not for current retirees.
So if you're 54 or 55, you might want to listen, because this will affect you. The idea, which was originally presented by Congressman Ryan, your running mate, is that we would give a voucher to seniors, and they could go out in the private marketplace and buy their own health insurance. The problem is
by their insurance,
because
not their health
the voucher won't
care.
necessarily keep up with healthcare inflation, it was estimated that this would cost the average senior about $6,000 a year. Now, in fairness,
in insurance,
what Governor Romney has now said is he'll maintain traditional Medicare alongside it. But there's still a problem, because what happens is those insurance companies are pretty clever at figuring out who are the younger and healthier seniors. They recruit them, leaving the older, sicker seniors in Medicare. And every healthcare economist who looks at it says over time what will happen is the traditional Medicare system will collapse. And then what you've got is folks like my grandmother at the mercy of the private insurance system, precisely at the time when they're most in need of decent health care. So I don't think vouchers are the right way to go.
That's not the way to go.
This is not my only my opinion. ARP thinks that the savings that we obtained from Medicare bolstered the system, lengthened the Medicare trust fund by 8 years. Benefits were not affected at all. And ironically, if you repeal Obamacare, and I have become fond of this term,
Obama insurance care,
if you repeal it, what happens is those seniors right away are going to be paying $600 more in prescription care. They're now going to have to be paying copays for basic checkups that can keep them healthier. And the primary beneficiary of that repeal are insurance companies that are estimated to gain billions of dollars back when they aren't making seniors any healthier. And I don't think that's the right approach when it comes to making sure that Medicare is stronger over the long term.
We'll talk about specifically about health care in a moment, but do you support the voucher system, Governor?
What I support is no change for current retirees and near retirees to Medicare.
We know.
And the President supports taking $716 billion out of that program.
we know.
So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is for people coming along that are young. What I do to make sure that we can keep Medicare in place for them is to allow them to either choose the current Medicare program or a private plan. Their choice.
Different insurance plans.
At least 2 plans that will be entirely at no cost to them. So they don't have to pay additional money, no additional $6,000. That's not going to happen. They'll have at least 2 plans. And by the way, if the government can be as efficient as the private sector and offer premiums that are as low as the private sector, people will be happy to get traditional Medicare. Or they'll be able to get a private plan.
Competition to who can offer the better premiums. Notice there's not one word about better health care.
I know my own view is I'd rather have a private plan. I just as soon not have the government telling me what kind of health care I get. I'd rather be able to have an insurance company. If I don't like them, I can get rid of them and find a different insurance company. But people make their own choice. The other thing we have to do to save Medicare, we have to have the benefits high for those
have to have.
income.
Yeah.
But for higher income people, we're going to have to lower some of the benefits.
We're going to have
we have to make sure this program is there for the long term.
We have to.
That's the plan that I put forward. And by the way, the idea came not even from Paul Ryan or Senator Wyden, who's a co-author of the bill with Paul Ryan in the Senate, but also came from Bill Clinton's chief of staff. This is an idea that's been around a long time, which is saying, hey, let's see if we can't get competition into the Medicare world so that people can get the choice of different plans at lower cost, better quality, I believe.
Better quality plans.
If I can just respond very quickly. First of all, every study has shown that Medicare has lower administrative costs than private insurance does, which is why seniors are generally pretty happy with it. And private insurers have to make a profit. Nothing wrong with that. That's what they do. And so you've got higher administrative costs plus profit on top of that. And if you are going to save any money through what Governor Romney is proposing, what has to happen is that the money has to come from somewhere. And when you move to a voucher system, you are putting seniors at the mercy of those insurance companies. And over time, if traditional Medicare has decayed or fallen apart, then they're stuck. And this is the reason why AARP has said that your plan would weaken Medicare substantially, and that's why they were supportive of the approach that we took. One last point I
Dueling insurance plans.
want to make. We do have to lower the cost of health care, not just in Medicare and
Talk about
Medicaid,
that.
but overall.
Oh, yeah. We do have to.
So
That's a big topic. Can we please get Medicare?
I want to get to it, but all I want to do is go very
Let's
quickly
get back to
before we leave the
Medicare.
economy.
Let's get back to Medicare.
No,
The president said that the government can provide the service at lower cost and without a profit.
All right.
If that's the case, then it will always be the best product that people can purchase. But my experience is the private sector typically is able to provide a better product at a lower cost.
Better plan.
Can the two of you agree that the voters have a choice, a clear choice between the two of you on Medicare?
Absolutely.
All right. So, to finish quickly, briefly, on the economy, what is your view about the level of federal regulation of the economy right now? Is there too much? And in your case, Mr. President, should there be more? Beginning with you. This is not a new 2-minute segment. Just
How we rule
we'll
ourselves.
go for a few minutes, and then we're going to go to health care.
Yeah, good.
Regulation is essential. You can't have a free market work if you don't have regulation. As a business person, I had to have I need to know the regulations. I needed them there. You couldn't have people opening up banks in their garage and making loans. I mean, you have to have regulations so that you can have an economy work. Every free economy has good regulation. At the same time, regulation can become excessive.
Is it excessive now?
In some places, yes. In other places, no. It can become out of date. And what's happened with some of the legislation that's been passed during the president's term, you see regulation become excessive, and it's hurt the economy. Let me give you an example. Dodd-Frank was passed, and it includes within it a number of provisions that I think has some unintended consequences that are harmful to the economy. One is it designates a number of banks as too big to fail, and they're effectively guaranteed by the federal government. This is the biggest kiss that's been given to New York banks I've ever seen. This is an enormous boon for them. There have been 122 community and small banks have closed since Dodd-Frank. So there's one example. Here's another. In Dodd-Frank, it says...
You want to repeal Dodd-Frank?
Well, I would repeal it and replace it. We're not going to get rid of all regulation. You have to have regulation. And there's some parts of Dodd-Frank that make all the sense in the world. You need transparency. You need to have
this. You need that. You need that.
Well, there's a specific. Let's
what we need.
Let me mention the other one. Let's talk the big.
Let's not. Okay. Let's let him respond. Let's let him respond to this specific on Dodd-Frank and what the governor just said.
Well, I think this is a great example. The reason we have been in such an enormous economic crisis was prompted by reckless behavior across the board. Now, it wasn't just on Wall Street.
Not systemic malfunction, but lousy drivers.
And mortgages that really shouldn't have been given because the folks didn't qualify. You had people who were borrowing money to buy a house that they couldn't afford. You had credit agencies that were stamping these as A1 great investments when they weren't. But you also had banks making money hand over fist, churning out products that the bankers themselves didn't even understand, in order to make big profits, but knowing that it made the entire system vulnerable. So what did we do? We stepped in and had the toughest reforms on Wall Street since the 1930s. We said, you've got banks, you've got to raise your capital requirements. You can't engage in some of this risky behavior that is putting Main Street at risk. We're going to make sure that you've got to have a living will, so we can know how you're going to wind things down if you make a bad bet, so we don't have other taxpayer bailouts. In the meantime, by the way, we also made sure that all the help that we provided those banks was paid back, every single dime, with interest. Now, Governor Romney has said he wants to repeal Dodd-Frank. And
no interest, I heard.
And it appears we've got some agreement that a marketplace to work has to have some regulation. But in the past, Governor Romney has said he just wants to repeal Dodd-Frank. Roll it back. And so the question is, does anybody out there think that the big problem we had is that there was too much oversight and regulation of Wall Street? Because if you do, then Governor Romney is your candidate. But that's not what I believe.
That's just not the facts. Look, we have to have regulation in Wall Street. That's why I'd have regulation. But I wouldn't designate 5 banks as too big to fail and give them a blank check. That's one of the unintended consequences of Dodd-Frank. It wasn't thought through properly. We need to get rid of that provision because
it wasn't thought through properly.
They're getting
the guys who wrote it.
Regulation in Dodd-Frank. You say we were giving mortgages to people who weren't qualified. It's exactly right. It's one of the reasons for the great financial calamity we had.
Oh, no, it's
and
not.
So Dodd-Frank correctly says we need to have qualified mortgages, and if you give a mortgage that's not qualified, there are big penalties. Except they didn't ever go on to define what a qualified mortgage was. It's been 2 years. We don't know what a qualified mortgage is yet. So banks are reluctant to make loans, mortgages. Try and get a mortgage these days. It's hurt the housing market because Dodd-Frank didn't anticipate putting in place the kinds of regulations you have to have. It's not that Dodd-Frank always was wrong with too much regulation. Sometimes they didn't come out with the clear regulations. I will make sure we don't hurt the functioning of our marketplace and our businesses because I want to bring back housing and get good jobs.
All right, I think we have another clear
get good jobs
between the two of you. Now let's move to health care, where I know there is a clear difference, and that has to do with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and it's a 2-minute new segment, and that means 2 minutes each, and you go first. Governor Romney, you wanted repeal. You want the Affordable Care Act repeal. Why?
I sure do. Well, in part, it comes again from my experience.
Talking about insurance plans again.
Came to me and she said, look, I can't afford insurance for myself or my son. I met a couple in Appleton, Wisconsin, and they said, we're thinking of dropping our insurance. We can't afford it. And the number of small businesses I've gone to that are saying they're dropping insurance because they can't afford it, the cost of health care is just prohibitive. And we got to deal with
the cost of health care insurance.
When you look at Obamacare, the Congressional Budget Office says it will cost $2,500 a year more than traditional insurance.
To the middleman.
So it's adding the cost.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, when the president ran for office, he said that by this year he would have brought down the cost of insurance for each family by $2,500 a family. Instead, it's gone up by that amount.
Wow.
So it's expensive. Expensive things hurt families. So that's one reason I don't want it. Second reason,
he doesn't want it.
$716
knows what he doesn't want.
For Medicare to pay for it.
Oh.
I want to put that money back in Medicare for our seniors.
Number
3, it puts in place an unelected board.
How's he going to pay for it?
People ultimately what kind of treatments they can have. I don't like that idea. Fourth, there was a survey done of small businesses across the country. It said, what's been the effect of Obamacare on your hiring plans? And 3/4 of them said it makes us less likely to hire people. I just don't know how the president could have come into office facing 23 million people out of work, rising unemployment, an economic crisis at the kitchen table, and spend his energy and passion for 2 years fighting for Obamacare instead of fighting for jobs for the American people.
So they walk in with their poll, fixed poll, and they say, this increase to your costs Is it going to affect your hiring practices? And they go, gee, you know, if we have to pay more over there, I guess we'll have to hire less. And then they report, hey, look, everybody's hiring less because of this increase in costs. Well, of course an increase in costs is going to result in them wanting to hire less. Jeez.
It has killed jobs.
Oh, killed
and the best
jobs.
course for healthcare.
Don't forget, created jobs in the health industry, killed jobs over there. That's what splashing in the pool means.
Is to do what we did in my state. Craft a plan at the state level that fits the needs of the state.
Crafted a plan.
And let's focus on getting the cost down for people rather than raising it with the $2,500 additional premium.
Mr. President, the argument against repeal.
Well, 4 years ago when I was running for office, I was traveling around and having those same conversations that Governor Romney talks about. And it wasn't just that small businesses were seeing costs skyrocket and they couldn't get affordable coverage even if they wanted to provide it to their employees.
Insurance plans.
It wasn't just that this was the biggest driver of our federal deficit, our overall health care costs, but
insurance
it was
plans.
families who were worried about going bankrupt if they got sick.
That's right.
Millions of families all across the country.
That's the
They have
health care
pre-existing
costs.
condition. They might not be able to get coverage at all.
Coverage.
If they did have coverage, insurance companies might impose an arbitrary limit. And so as a consequence, they're paying their premiums. Somebody gets really sick. Lo and behold, they don't have enough money to pay the bills because the insurance companies say that
things are bad. He knows.
So we did work on this alongside working on jobs, because
alongside
this is
jobs,
making sure that
working on
middle-class
jobs,
families are secure in this country.
Working
and
on jobs.
Let me tell you exactly what Obamacare did. Number one, if you've got health insurance, it doesn't mean a government takeover. You keep your own insurance, you keep your own doctor, but it does say insurance companies can't jerk you around. They can't impose arbitrary lifetime limits. They have to let you keep your kid on your insurance plan until you're 26 years old. And it also says that you're going to have to get rebates if insurance companies are spending more on administrative costs and profits than they are on actual care. Number two,
need it.
if you don't have health
Army of
insurance, we're essentially
accountants for
setting up
that.
a group plan that allows you to benefit from group rates that are typically 18% lower than if you're out there trying to get insurance on the individual market.
For your insurance plan.
Now, the last point I'd make before
2 minutes is up, sir.
no, I think I had 5 seconds before you interrupted me. Was the irony is that we've seen this model work really well in Massachusetts, because Governor Romney did a good thing working with Democrats in the state to set up what is essentially the identical model, and as a consequence, people are covered there. It hasn't destroyed jobs, and as a consequence, we now have a system in which we have the opportunity to start bringing down costs as opposed to just leaving millions of people.
Well, that's a good shot.
5 seconds went away a long time ago.
All
right, Governor, tell the president directly why you think what he just said is wrong about Obama.
Well, I did with my first statement, but I'll go on.
Please elaborate.
I'll elaborate, exactly right. First of all, I like the way we did it in Massachusetts. I like the fact that in my state we had Republicans and Democrats come together and work together. What you did instead was to push through a plan without a single Republican.
Forget it.
As a matter of fact, when
duck
Massachusetts
the
did something
issue.
quite extraordinary, elected a Republican senator to stop Obamacare, you pushed it through
Sidestepped
anyway.
onto
So
procedure.
entirely on a partisan basis, instead of bringing America together and having a discussion.
Sidestep to
you pushed through
procedure.
something
Duck the
that you and Nancy
question.
Pelosi and Harry Reid thought was the best answer and drove it through. Well, we did in a legislature 87% Democrat.
Oh, we talked to the
We worked together. 200 legislators.
Now
in the
answer the
legislature.
question.
Only 2 voted against the plan by the time we were finished. What were some differences? We didn't raise taxes. You raised them by $1 trillion.
That's
in
not the
Obamacare. We
plan.
didn't cut Medicare. Of course, we don't have Medicare, but we didn't cut Medicare.
What did you do is the question, not what
We
you
didn't put in place
didn't.
a board that can
We
tell
know
people
you
all the what
didn't.
treatments
You
they're gonna
didn't.
receive. We didn't also
What didn't you do? Come on.
do something that I think a number of people across this country recognize, which is put
God,
people
there's
in
so
a
many
position where
things he
they can
could
lose
have didn't
insurance
have done,
They
right?
had, and they wanted. Right now, the CBO says up to 20 million people will lose
Now
their
answer
insurance
what you did.
Obamacare goes into effect next year.
And how's it different?
Likewise, a study by McKinsey and Company of American Business that said 30%
What a dancer, eh?
are anticipating dropping people from coverage.
Jeez.
So for those reasons, for the tax, for Medicare, for this board, and for people losing their insurance, this is why the American people don't want Medicare, they want Obamacare.
Jesus.
It's why Republicans said,
How is
do
it
not do
different
this.
from
And
your
Republicans
care?
Had the plan. They put a plan out. They put a plan, a bipartisan plan that was swept aside. I think something this big, this important,
Wow.
has to be done on a bipartisan basis.
What a
And
song
we
and
have to have a
dance,
president
eh?
who can reach across the aisle and fashion important legislation with the input from both parties.
That's right, both back to
Governor
procedure.
Romney said this has to be done on a bipartisan basis. This was a bipartisan idea. In fact, it was a Republican idea. And Governor Romney, at the beginning of his debate,
Bingo.
wrote and said, what we did in Massachusetts could be a model for the nation. And I agree that the Democratic legislators in Massachusetts might have given some advice to Republicans in Congress about how to cooperate. But the fact of the matter is,
Bingo.
we use the same advisors, and they say it's the same plan.
And he couldn't have done it.
When Governor Romney talks about this board, for example, unelected board that we've created, what this is
And we're arguing about insurance
healthcare
here.
experts, doctors, etc., to figure out how can we reduce the cost of care in the system overall.
The finance
Because
boys
there are two ways of dealing with our
cutting
healthcare
back on
crisis.
Q-tips,
One is to simply leave a whole bunch of people uninsured and let them fend for themselves.
as they are.
Let businesses figure out how long they can continue to pay premiums until finally they just give up and their workers are no longer getting insured. And that's been the trend line.
Yeah,
Or
right.
alternatively, we can figure out how do we make the cost of care more effective.
We can figure it out. That's all we gotta do.
So,
Figure it out.
It's Cleveland Clinic, one of the best healthcare systems in the world. They actually provide great care,
One
cheaper
hospital.
than average. And the reason they do is because they do some smart things. They say, if a patient's coming in, let's get all the doctors together at once, do one test instead of having the patient run around with 10 tests. Let's make sure that we're providing preventive
wow,
care
that's
so we're catching
such
the onset of
savings.
something like diabetes.
Get them all
Let's-
together in one
let's
room at
pay
once.
providers on the basis of performance.
What are the chances
as
of
opposed to
that?
on the
They're
basis
busy.
of how many procedures they've engaged in. Now, so what this board does is basically identifies best practices and says, let's use the purchasing power of Medicare and Medicaid to help to institutionalize all these good things that we do. And the fact of the
Let's
matter
look
is
all right.
that when Obamacare is fully implemented, we're going to be in a position to show that costs are going down. And over
See,
the last
these
2
insurance
years,
companies.
healthcare premiums have gone up. It's true, but they've gone up slower than any time in the last 50 years. So we're already beginning
Healthcare
to see progress.
premiums.
In the meantime, folks out there with insurance, you're already getting a rebate. Let me make one last point. Governor Romney says we should replace it. I'm just going to repeal it, but we can replace it with something. But the problem is he hasn't described what exactly we'd replace it with, other than saying we're going to leave it to the states. But the fact of the matter is that some of the prescriptions that he's offered, like letting you buy insurance across state lines, there's no indication that that somehow is going to help somebody who's got a pre-existing condition be able to finally buy insurance. In fact, it's estimated that by repealing Obamacare, you're looking at 50 million people losing health insurance at a time when it's vitally important.
Let's let the governor explain what you would do.
Well,
Obamacare is repealed. How would you replace it?
Well, actually, it's a lengthy description, but number one, pre-existing conditions are covered under my plan. Number two, young people are able to stay on their family plan. That's already offered in the private marketplace. You don't have to have the government mandate that for that to occur. But let's come back to something the President and I agree on, which is the key task we have in healthcare is to get the cost down so it's more affordable for families.
To have insurance.
And then he has as a model for doing that a board of people at the government, an unelected board, appointed board, who are going to decide what kind of treatment you want to have. In my opinion, the government is not effective in bringing down the cost of almost anything. As a matter of fact, free people and free enterprises trying to find ways to do things better are able to be more effective in bringing down the cost than the government will ever be. Your example of the Cleveland Clinic is my case in point, along with several others I could describe. This is the private market. These are enterprises competing with each other, learning how to do better and better jobs. I used to consult to businesses, to hospitals and to healthcare providers. I was astonished at the creativity and innovation that exists in the American people. In order to bring the cost of healthcare down, we don't need to have a board of 15 people telling us what kinds of treatments we should have. We instead need to put insurance plans, providers, hospitals, doctors on target such that they have an incentive, as you say,
all we need to do
for doing an excellent job for keeping costs down, and that's happening. Intermountain Healthcare does it superbly well. Mayo Clinic is doing it superbly well. Cleveland Clinic, others. But the right answer is not to have the federal government take over healthcare and start mandating to the providers across America, telling a patient and a doctor.
That's what the answer is not.
That's the wrong way to go.
That's right, the wrong way.
Market and individual responsibility always work best.
Let me just point out, first of all, this board that we're talking about can't make decisions about what treatments are given. That's explicitly prohibited in the law. But let's go back to what Governor Romney indicated, that under his plan, he would be able to cover people with pre-existing conditions. Well, actually, Governor, that isn't what your plan does. What your plan does is to duplicate what's already the law, which says if you are out of health insurance for 3 months, then you can end up getting continuous coverage, and an insurance company can't deny you if it's been under 90 days. But that's already the law, and that doesn't help the millions of people out there with pre-existing conditions. There's a reason why Governor Romney set up the plan that he did in Massachusetts. It wasn't a government takeover of healthcare. It was the largest expansion of private insurance. But what it does say is that insurers, you've got to take everything.
The middleman had a big expansion.
It also means that you've got more customers.
Yeah.
But when Governor Romney says that he'll replace it with something, but can't detail how it will be, in fact, replaced, and the reason he set up the system he did in Massachusetts was because there isn't a better way of dealing with the pre-existing conditions problem. It just reminds me of, he says that he's going to close deductions and loopholes for his tax plan. That's how it's going to be paid for, but we don't know the details. He says that he's going to replace Wall Street reform.
Romney bag,
We don't know exactly which ones. He won't tell us. He now says he's going to replace Obamacare and assure that all the good things that are in it are going to be in there, and you don't have to worry. And at some point, I think the American people have to ask themselves, is the reason that Governor Romney is keeping all these plans to replace secret because they're too good? Is it because that somehow middle-class families are going to benefit too much from them? No, the reason is because when we reform Wall Street, when we tackle the problem of pre-existing conditions, then these are tough problems, and we've got to make choices. And the choices we've made have been ones that ultimately are benefiting middle-class families all across the country.
We're going to move to
No, I have to respond to that, which is my experience as a governor, is if I come in and lay down a piece of legislation and say it's my way or the highway, I don't get a lot done.
Back to procedure.
It's the same way that Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan worked together some years ago. When Ronald Reagan ran for office, he laid out the principles that he was going to foster. He said he was going to lower tax rates. He said he was going to broaden the base. You said the same thing. You're going to simplify the tax code, broaden the base.
Everybody says it, right?
I want to bring down the tax burden.
Doesn't everybody want that?
And I'm going to work together with Congress to say, okay, what are the various ways we could bring down deductions, for instance?
Yes,
one way, for instance, would be to have a single number. Make up a number, $25,000, $50,000. Anybody can have deductions up to that amount. And then that number disappears for high-income people. That's one way one could do it. One could follow Bowles Simpson as a model and take deduction by deduction.
The rich people would lose their $50,000
to accomplish the objective I have, which is to bring down rates, broaden the base, simplify the code, and create incentives for growth. And with regards to health care, you had remarkable details with regards to my pre-existing condition plan. You obviously studied up on my plan. In fact, I do have a plan that deals with people with pre-existing conditions. That's part of my health care plan. And what we did in Massachusetts is a model for the nation, state by state. And I said that at that time.
And what's the difference between Obamacare?
Taking over health care for the entire nation and whisking aside the 10th Amendment, which gives states the rights for these kinds of things, is not the course for America to have a stronger, more vibrant economy.
That is a terrific segue to our next segment, and is the role of government. And let's see, role of government, and it is, you are first on this, Mr. President, and the question is this: do you believe, both of you, but you had the first 2 minutes on this, Mr. President, do you believe there's a fundamental difference between the two of you as to how you view the mission of the federal government?
Well, I definitely think there are differences.
Yeah.
The first role of the federal government is to keep the American people safe. That's its most basic function. And as Commander-in-Chief, that is something that I've worked on and thought about every single day that I've been in the Oval Office.
Well, yeah, you're in war all full
But
time.
I also believe that government has the capacity, the federal government has the capacity, to help open up opportunity and create ladders of opportunity and to create frameworks where the American people can succeed. Look, the genius of America is the free enterprise system and freedom, and the fact that people can go out there and start a business, work on an idea, make their own decisions. But
once you find the cash.
As Abraham Lincoln understood, there are also some things we do better together. So in the middle of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said,
issued greenbacks and turn us free. How come this moron doesn't know?
Start the National Academy of Sciences. Let's start land grant colleges.
Print $450 million in greenbacks
for all Americans, because if all Americans are getting opportunity, we're all going to be better off. That doesn't restrict people's freedom, that enhances it. And so what I've tried to do
like
as
Lincoln,
president is to apply those same principles.
Accept money.
Now, when it comes to education, what I've said is we've got to reform schools that are not working. We use race to the top, or the top-down approach, Governor. What we've said is to states, we'll give you more money if you initiate reforms. And as a consequence, you have 46 states around the country who have made a real difference. But what I've also said is, let's hire another 100,000 math and science teachers to make sure we maintain.
Just got to come up with paychecks from somewhere, and we can do it, can't we?
To succeed. And
let's.
Hard-pressed states right now can't all do that. In fact, we've seen layoffs of hundreds of thousands of teachers over the last several years.
Well, let's hire 100,000 more.
You think we need more teachers? I do, because I think that
he thinks we need more.
Where the federal government can help, it can't do it all.
Couldn't stop laying off hundreds of thousands. Promises, let's have 100,000 more.
And that will create jobs because companies want to locate in places where we've got a skilled workforce.
Be a skilled workforce. They want to locate and create jobs there, but they got no money.
Massachusetts schools are ranked #1 of all 50 states. And the key to great schools, great teachers.
Oh,
so
God.
I reject the idea that I don't believe in great teachers or more teachers. Every school district, every state should make that decision on their own. The role of government. Look behind us. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. The role of government is to promote and protect the principles of those documents. First, life and liberty.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to protect the lives and liberties of our people, and that means a military second to none. I do not believe in military. I believe in maintaining the strength of America's military. Second, in that line that says we are endowed by our
everybody should believe the same thing in all the other countries too,
I believe we must maintain our commitment to religious tolerance and freedom.
Certainly not a Star Trekkie.
That statement also says that we are endowed by our Creator with the right to pursue happiness as we choose.
Yeah, with guns.
But that is, one, making sure that those people who are less fortunate and can't care for themselves are cared by one another.
Oh, making sure.
We're a nation that believes that we're all children of the same God.
Oh, yes.
And we care for those that have difficulties.
He cares.
Those that are elderly and have problems and challenges, those that are disabled, we care for them.
Mr. Big Money
cares. Innovation, all these things desired out of the American heart to provide the pursuit of happiness for our citizens.
That's what he wants.
But we also believe in maintaining
what we believe.
Individuals the right to pursue their dreams and not to have the government substitute itself for the rights of free individuals. And what we're seeing right now is, in my view,
Not what he
a
believes.
trickle-down government approach, which has government thinking it can do a better job than free people pursuing their dreams. And it's not working. And the proof of that is 23 million people out of work. The proof of that is 1 out of 6 people in poverty. The proof of that is we've gone from 32 million on food stamps to 47 million on food stamps.
Things are bad.
The proof of that is that 50% of college graduates this year can't find work. We know that the path we're
Things are
taking
bad.
is not working.
Not
it's
working.
time for a new path.
Now, let's get to some
You got a new path?
specifics in terms of how each of you views the role of government. How do you
He knows we
communicate?
need a new path.
Does the federal government have the responsibility to improve the quality of public education in America?
Oh,
The primary responsibility for education is of course, at the state and local level. But the federal government also can play a very important role. And I agree with Secretary Arnie Duncan. It's some ideas he's put
Next
forward.
time, let's
And
don't have
raised the
education
federal government.
insurance.
I agree with it. And congratulate him for pursuing that. The federal government can get local and state schools to do a better job. My own view, by the way,
better jobs.
is I've added to that. I happen to believe I want
He
the
believes.
kids that are getting federal dollars from IDEA or Title I. These are disabled kids or poor kids or lower income kids, rather. I want them to be able to go to the school of their choice.
that's what he wants.
So all federal funds, instead of going to the state or to the school district, I'd have go, if you will, follow the child and let the parent and the child decide where to send their student.
How do you see the federal government?
Sounds like vouchers to me.
As I said, to improve the quality of public education in this country.
Well, as I've indicated, I think that it has a significant role to play. Through our Race to the Top program, we've worked with
education's
Republican and
important.
Democratic governors to initiate major reforms, and they're having an impact right now.
Do you think you have a difference with your views and those of Governor Romney about education?
This is where budgets matter, because budgets reflect choices.
Right. Funding
So
again.
when Governor Romney indicates that he wants to cut taxes
That's what he wants.
and potentially benefit folks like me and him,
That's what he wants.
and to pay for it, we're having to initiate significant cuts in federal support for education. That makes a difference. You know, his running mate, Congressman Ryan, put forward a budget that reflects many of the principles that Governor Romney's talked about. And it wasn't very detailed. This seems to be a trend, but what it did do is to, if you extrapolated how much money we're talking about, you look at cutting the education budget by up to 20%. When it comes to
Running out of money.
Community colleges, we are seeing
No
great work
chips.
done out there all over the country, because we have the opportunity to train people for jobs that exist right now. One of the things I suspect Governor Romney and I probably agree on is getting business.
We have the opportunity to train people for jobs that exist right now? You mean there are paychecks out there sitting idle, waiting for people, skilled people, to give them jobs, and other skilled people aren't snapping them up? Sounds like bull to me.
This is to work with community colleges so that they're setting up their training programs.
Do you agree, Governor?
Let me just finish the point. I suspect it'll be a small
Going around
agreement.
my state, by the way, yeah.
Where they're partnering so that they're designing training programs, and people who are going through them know that there's a job waiting for them if they complete it.
Okay.
That makes a big difference, but that...
And how are you going to know there's a job waiting for you unless you know there's a paycheck waiting for you? And he's saying, and that requires a paycheck. Let's see if he says paycheck. He says that requires
some federal support. Let me just say
Money.
a final example. When it comes to making college affordable, whether it's 2-year or 4-year, one of the things that I did as president was we were sending $60 billion to banks and lenders as middlemen for the student loan program, even though the loans were guaranteed, so there was no risk for the
He
banks.
sounds like the insurance boys, right? With the Medicare.
With the lenders, but they were taking billions out of the system.
Yeah.
And we said, why not cut out the middleman? And as a consequence, what we've been able to do is to provide millions more students assistance, lower or keep low interest rates on student loans.
By paying it for them with our tax dollars, right? They certainly didn't legislate that the bank should take less money. Someone's going to bite the bullet.
And this is an example of where our priorities make a difference.
That's his example.
I genuinely believe cares about education, but when he tells a student that you should borrow money from your parents to go to college, that indicates the degree to which there may not be as much of a focus on the fact that folks like myself, folks like Michelle, kids probably who attend University of Denver, just don't have that option. And for us to be able to make sure that they've got that opportunity and they can walk through that door, that is vitally important. Not just to those kids, it's how we're going to grow this economy over the long term.
That's right.
We're running out of time.
We got to get them some support, some money. So basically his answer was, we got to get them some money. And he doesn't have any.
Jim,
but notice he never promised them any. He just said he wanted them to have some. So when next time when he doesn't deliver, you didn't deliver. I didn't say I'd give you any money. I just said I wanted you to have some.
Yes, respond to that.
Mr. President, you're entitled as a president of your own airplane and your own house, but not your own facts. All right, I'm not going to cut education funding. I don't have any plan to cut education funding and grants that go to people going to college. I'm planning on continuing to grow, so I'm not planning on making changes there. But you make a very
Where will he get the money?
Which is the place you put your money. Just makes a pretty clear indication of where your heart is. You put $90 billion into green jobs. And I'm all in favor of green energy. $90 billion.
You said this before.
That would have hired 2 million teachers.
Oh,
$90 billion. And these businesses, many of them have gone out of business. I think about half of them, of the ones that have been invested.
Doesn't like the way he splashed, right?
By people who are contributors to your campaign.
Gee, you splashed over there and they went broke. You should have splashed over here.
Government, we're talking about the role of government, is not to become the economic player, picking winners and losers.
But that's what they do,
what kind of health treatment they can receive, taking over the healthcare system that has existed in this country for a long, long time. It has produced the best health records in the world. Just to say, how do we make the private sector become more...
The best health records in the world. I mean, 40 million people got no health care, and he thinks that this is the best in the world. Pretty delusional, right?
Efficient and more effective. How do we get schools to be more competitive? Let's grade them. I propose we grade our schools so parents know which schools
that would really help.
Failing.
Hire some accountants to go grade the schools.
Yeah. Successful.
New bureaucracy.
Our commitment to education. I wanted to make it more effective and efficient. And by the way,
that's what he wants.
I've had that experience. I don't just talk about it. I've been there. Massachusetts schools are ranked #1 in the nation. This is not because I didn't have commitment to education. It's because I care about education for all of our kids.
That's right, because he cares.
Look at me, sir. We've got barely have 3 minutes left. I'm not going to grade the two of you and say your answers have been too long or I've done a poor job.
You've done a great job.
Oh, well, no. But the fact is, government, the role of government and governing, we've lost a pod, in other words. So we only have three minutes left in the debate before we go to your closing statements. And so I want to ask...
Not a word about the wars.
Finally here, and remember, we've got 3 minutes total time.
Not a word about marijuana, which most of the country's interested in.
The legislative functions of the federal government right now are in a state of paralysis as a result.
Not a word about the Patriot Act and civil liberties destroyed.
In your case, if re-elected in your case...
Big issues, the Ron Paul issues.
Jim, I had the great experience, it didn't seem like it at the time, of being elected in a state where my legislature was 87% Democrat. And that meant I figured out from day one I had to get along. And I had to work across the aisle to get anything done. We drove our schools to be #1 in the nation. We cut taxes 19 times.
What would you do as president?
As president, I will sit down on day one.
You will sit!
Actually, the day after I get elected. I'll sit down with leaders, the Democratic leaders, as well as Republican leaders.
Oh, yeah.
And continue, as we did in my state. We met every Monday for a couple hours.
Oh, yeah.
Talked about
That'll do it.
The challenges in our state.
Talk of the challenges.
We have to work on a collaborative basis.
Working together
as our
is what it takes.
But because there's common ground. And the challenges America faces right now. Look, the reason I'm in this race is there are people that are really hurting today in this country.
Oh, yeah.
And we face
That's why he's running, because they're hurting.
What's happening in the Middle East? There are developments around the world that are of real concern.
Middle East.
And Republicans Republicans and Democrats both love America, but we need to have leadership in Washington that will actually bring people together and get the job done, and could not care less if it's a Republican or a Democrat.
Bring people together and get the job done.
I'll do it again.
Mr. President.
First of all, I think Governor Romney is going to have a busy first day because he's also going to repeal Obamacare, which will not be very popular among Democrats as you're sitting down with him. But, look, my philosophy has been
Obama insurance
take
care
ideas from anybody, Democrat or Republican, as long as they're advancing the cause of making middle-class families stronger and giving ladders of opportunity to the middle class. That's how we cut taxes for middle-class families and small businesses. That's how we cut $1 trillion of spending that wasn't advancing that cause. That's how we signed 3 trade deals into law that are helping us to double our exports and sell more American products around the world. That's how we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's how we ended the war in Iraq, as I promised, and that's how we ended the war in Afghanistan. That's how we went after Al-Qaeda.
You can bank on that.
So we've seen progress even under Republican control of the House of Representatives.
He's droning new countries.
Ultimately, part of being principled, part of being a leader, is A, being able to describe exactly what it is that you intend to do.
And don't look like a puppet on a string.
Sit down. But you have to have a plan. Number 2, what's important is occasionally you've got to say no to folks both in your own party and in the other party. And yes, have we had some fights between me and the Republicans when they fought back against us reining in the excesses of Wall Street? Absolutely, because that was a fight that needed to be.
He reined in the excesses.
When we were fighting about whether or not we were going to make sure that Americans had more security with their health insurance, and they said no. Yes, that was a fight that we needed to have.
More security with health insurance.
Part of leadership and governing is both saying what it is that you are for, but also being willing to say no to some things. And I've got to tell you, Governor Romney, when it comes to his own party during the course of this campaign, has not displayed that willingness to say no to some of the more extreme parts of his party.
Well, he didn't say no to anything. He won't cut anything. And he'll give everybody everything.
Governor Romney, you won the toss, and you elected to go last, so you have a closing.
Romney won't cut anything, and he'll give everybody everything.
Well, Jim, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Governor Romney, because I think this was a terrific debate, and I very much appreciate it. And I want to thank the University of Denver.
No zingers coming up.
4 years ago, we were going through a major crisis. And yet, my faith and confidence in the American future is undiminished. And the reason is because of its people. Because the woman I met in North Carolina who decided at 55 to go back to school because she wanted to inspire her daughter and now has a job from that new training that she's gotten. Because the company in Minnesota who was willing to give up salaries and perks for their executives to make sure that they didn't lay off workers during a recession. The auto workers that you meet in Toledo or Detroit take such pride in building the best cars in the world, not just because of paycheck, but because it gives them that sense of pride that they're helping to build America. And so the question now is, how do we build on those strengths? And everything that I've tried to do, and everything that I'm now proposing for the next 4 years in terms of improving our education system or developing American energy, and making sure that we're closing loopholes for companies that are shipping jobs overseas, focusing on small businesses and companies that are creating jobs here in the United States, or we're closing our deficit in a responsible, balanced way that allows us to invest in our future.
Invest money we don't have.
To make sure that the American people, their genius, their grit, their determination, is channeled, and they have an opportunity to succeed, and everybody's getting a fair shot, and everybody's getting a fair share.
Oh yeah, wouldn't it be wonderful?
Everybody's getting a fair share, and everybody's playing by the same rules.
Yeah, wouldn't it be wonderful, That's what he wants.
4 years ago, I said that I'm not a perfect man, and I wouldn't be a perfect president.
Are you sure, Blue? That was certainly right, yeah.
But I also promised that I'd fight every single day on behalf of the American people, the middle class, and all those who are striving to get in the middle class. I've kept that promise.
Oh yeah, sure.
And if you'll vote for me, then I promise I'll fight this as hard in the second term.
Hey, the middle class now lives in their cars.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for tuning in this evening. This is an important election, and I'm concerned about America. I'm concerned about the direction America has been taking over the last 4 years.
He's concerned.
I know this is bigger than an election about the two of us as individuals. It's bigger than our respective parties. It's an election about the course of America. What kind of America do you want to have for yourself and for your children?
And why only two visions?
And there are two very different paths that we began speaking about this evening.
And there are others we don't hear about,
We're going to have
right?
two more presidential debates.
Libertarian, green.
We'll talk about those two paths. But they lead in very different directions. And it's not just looking to our words that you have to take in evidence of where they go. You can look at the record. There's no question in my mind that if the president were to be reelected, you'll continue to see a middle-class squeeze, with incomes going down and prices going up.
And with me, same.
You'll see chronic unemployment. We've had 43 straight months with unemployment above 8%.
Wow.
If I'm
I bet
president, I will create
you'll break that record.
12 million new jobs
Oh,
in this country.
12 million new jobs. First time he says that.
Reelected, Obamacare
What a
will be fully
promise, eh?
installed. In my view, that's going to
12
be a
million.
whole different way of life for people who kind of
Without
have the
cutting
insurance plan they had in
anywhere.
the past. Many will lose it. You're going to see
12
premiums go
million.
up by some $2,500 per family. If I'm elected, we won't have Obamacare. We'll put in place the kind of principles that I've put in place in my own state and allow each state to craft their own programs to get people insured, and we'll focus on getting
higher commissions in 50 states to draft 50 programs. Yes.
You're going to see a
Bureaucrat
$716 billion cut to Medicare.
Oh, yeah, and they're going to cut the funds
People will lose
too.
Medicare Advantage. You'll have hospitals and providers that will no longer accept Medicare patients. I'll restore that $716 billion to Medicare.
Oh, yeah,
and finally,
sure.
military. The president's reelected, you'll see dramatic cuts to our military. The Secretary of Defense has said these would be even devastating. I will not cut our commitment to our military.
That's
I
right.
will keep America strong and get America's
That's
middle
right.
class working again.
So he's not
Thank
cutting
you, Jim.
anywhere.
Thank you, Governor. Thank
He
you.
hasn't had a cut all
The next
night.
debate will be the vice presidential event on Thursday, October 11th at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. For now, from the University of Denver, I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Oh, mercilessly shorter than the 2 hours I thought it was, only 1.5 hours. So there it is, the two low-tech candidate, the lawyer and the finance boy, discussing how they're going to want a better world, better country in the United States. And I hope I made a really boring thing a little more interesting, you know, but I think I have a right when you consider if you YouTube for Prime Minister of the planet, I'm the only declared candidate, and the Argentine solution and the Unilets, fixing it from the top, fixing it from the bottom, are going on, and I help push each way. So I think I got a right to stick my nose in here and make fun of the low-techs when they keep running out of chips. Especially when you have the Kucinich Bill 2990 to use U.S. Treasury money to finance all infrastructure repair. Imagine there's a bill in Congress right now to fix their country's money, and they're not doing anything about it, and they're having an election. And it's kind of sad how they didn't talk about the wars, right? Not a word about getting out of the wars. As if they're not even going on. Sad.